Okay,
Okay.
Rachel, thank you so
Hi.
much for doing this today with
My
me.
pleasure.
Okay, so I would love to start. Just tell me a little bit about what you do, how long you've been doing it, how you got started doing it.
Sure. Yeah. So I am a VIP matchmaker and dating expert. I started working in the dating and relationship and kind of coaching space by working with Neil Strauss, who is a New York Times 10-time bestselling author, who is he's known for writing the game. And so people are like, is that questionable advice? And what were you really doing? But no, he's a brilliant man, and he really was the first one that introduced me to working with men and going deep into healing and overcoming trauma and really, like healthy masculinity. And yeah, I saw that I had a calling for that, for working with men, and I really loved seeing them in their hearts. And so I started coaching specifically men. Then I started working with women as well because, as we know, it's dysfunctional on both sides,
Mhm.
and that parlayed into matchmaking. So
Okay,
yeah.
amazing. So,
Mhm.
so fun and so interesting. I love this topic.
So do I. I've been
Yeah,
obsessed with it since I was a little kid. It's like human dynamics around romantic relationships are just so fascinating.
it really is. Yes. Okay. So, can you talk a little bit about like toxic masculinity and versus healthy masculinity? What does that really look like? Because I know that's a big topic these days.
Yeah, so I know I said healthy masculinity, and I was like, that's going to open it up for what's toxic and healthy masculinity. And I feel like there's no necessarily one answer to answer that, because people have toxic traits and people have healthy traits. And so I think that there's been this overly sensationalized view of this alpha man who has no emotion and he just is very controlling or whatever. And that's like toxic masculinity. That's really a caricature of a man, which isn't very fair to men, because even those men who portray those things, are functioning from a place of probably a lot of wounding or what they've seen, and there's not a lot of compassion. So it's just like, oh, they're toxic.
Mhm.
And then, healthy masculinity, some people would say it's integrated masculine and feminine within one man. And so, what does that really mean? Because that also sounds kind of a little like woo woo and weird.
Mhm.
And I think a man or a woman who are just have a healthy integration, they're healthy individuals. They know how to communicate, they have integrity, and there is a sense of roles. I love what it says in the Bible about men and women being equal but different. And so I think that the more we embrace that, the healthier we're going to be in relationships.
Totally. Yeah. And what I've been noticing or just kind of questioning myself lately is it takes a lot for a man to be vulnerable and open up and show those emotions too, right? So if we as women are defensive or not creating a safe place for that, then that could create the dynamic where it seems like men are closed off and don't have emotions, right?
Absolutely. So I think that's a big part of it. I think it's beautiful you're looking at that, because women have lost touch with their femininity, which then makes it unsafe for men to open up and express those parts. And so it's not just a man who's toxic, and it's not just a woman who's toxic or healthy. Oftentimes it's the dynamic between two individuals, and women have lost that softness and that safe place. Like, the men that I work with are these very high power men who have very successful careers, and really what they want is a woman who can be that soft place and a rock. To some degree, of course, they want to be the rock for the family, but there is a strength about a woman that just helps a man continue to go back out there in the world.
Yes. So
Yeah.
good. Okay. So what are some of the biggest dating challenges you see today?
Um, okay, so I think expectations are a huge thing. I think that unfortunately, it's a very narcissistic culture that we live in, and
Mm.
it's all about me, 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 and it's very selfish. And so, where is love? Where is compassion in that equation? And I think people have very unrealistic standards. So we see it's not just, oh, movies and what they saw, Cinderella and this, whatever. It's like, no, we're constantly pumped full of these really unhealthy views of, everyone's so successful and everyone's so happy because they see these snippets on social media. And, it's unfortunate because people are looking for something unrealistic. And so therefore they just don't give people a chance, or they're not prioritizing the things that are healthy, and they're not therefore having an open mind. People have this inflated sense of self and they think, well, I deserve the absolute best human on this planet, not recognizing that two people are going to grow together in a relationship. And it's, there's no perfect person. And that's really a way that people keep themselves from experiencing deep intimacy and love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, right. And things are going to come up in relationships too.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's all about bringing the best out in each other. So that brings me to my next question. What characteristics and traits and things do you look for when you're matching people?
Yeah, so I really love looking at long-term vision, or short-term vision too. Like, what do people really want? What do they value and prioritize in their lives? What type of lifestyle are they looking for? What are their fundamental beliefs? So if someone has a religious background, obviously bringing people together who have a similar love for God is, we want that. Or someone who wants children or doesn't want children, loves traveling, doesn't love traveling. It's looking at lifestyle and belief systems. And of course there's a bit of, there's a reason that we get paid really well to do what we do. And so there's definitely an intuitive nature about it, but really, it's about bringing good people together who are as well aligned as possible, and then leaving it in God's hands and the individual's hands. Because yeah, it's fun. I'm like, okay, here are people that are good on paper. Let's see what happens, because you just never know. So it's really fascinating.
It is. I love that. And so everything you said has nothing to do with so many of the things that I hear about women talking about when they're looking for men, like height and what they
Hmm.
do for a career and that type of thing. So
Yeah.
in my opinion, the dating apps are just all backwards, and it's a setup for a disaster because it's more about attraction and chemistry and versus
Hmm.
real compatibility, which is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do think, if I said that that stuff didn't play a role in it, that would not be honest,
Yeah.
because I do think men are quite visual creatures. And so the more
Yeah.
masculine the man, probably the more feminine of a woman he's looking for. So I
Okay.
always look at it like that. If a man's highly masculine, then the pendulum's going to swing and he's going to want a very feminine polarity. If a man is, more in this like alpha beta, he might get an alpha beta kind of woman, so it's, yeah. So looking at that, but I do, one of the things that's really challenging is when someone's like, I reach out to a lot of women and I am usually bringing them a man who's very serious about relationship, who is probably at minimum a multimillionaire, who has a solid career, who is like a good person. And I vetted them and they're serious about this. And they'll be like, oh, he's 5'10" and he's not 6'2", or he's not a former professional athlete, or these things. And I think to myself, or his abs aren't good enough, or her butt isn't firm enough, or these things. And I just think, we've lost it if this is really the stuff. I mean, again, attraction is important,
Mhm.
but I think that we have an unhealthy understanding of what attraction is too, where people are expecting to feel these fireworks immediately and they have to be the most attracted to this person, and it's going to be the most amazing man that they've ever met, the most amazing woman. It's just going to be so obvious. And I think that instead of those fireworks, sometimes it's really about a subtle peace that you feel with somebody, and then it's a curiosity and you continue to peel back the layers, and that can be really healthy. And that is not going to have anything to do with whether or not the man is 6'2".
Totally. Yes. I love that you said that. You said it so beautifully. It makes so much sense when you think about it like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, it makes sense in my head when I'm the objective observer, and sometimes I get really frustrated, and sometimes I know I shouldn't do it and it's really not professional of me, but women who really don't know, I'll be like, they're like, yeah, no, he's 5'9", so he wouldn't be for me. And they're, meanwhile, they're maybe like 5'4" or something. I'm like, I don't really understand what the problem is there. Maybe he's 2 years older than would be their ideal range. And sometimes I'm like, he also makes $50 million a year. Could that maybe make up for like like, I don't know. And then they're like,
Yeah.
oh, well, maybe I could get behind it. And I'm like, oh, never mind, found someone else. Like,
Yeah.
I'll move on. I will move on if people aren't open-minded. And I think that that sounds kind of harsh, but if someone's open-minded, that tells me that they're actually serious. Their heart's actually open.
Hmm. Well, yeah, totally. Because I mean, it is a lot about how you feel about a person too, not just being so rigid. And yeah, I mean, people who are like that, they're missing out on great matches. So,
And I just want to say, I mean, it doesn't matter if somebody makes $50 million a year,
mhm,
5 million, 500,000, 50, whatever it is. It doesn't, I'm not saying that that is the thing that matters, but
mhm.
people who tend to come up with these more superficial barriers, it's like, well, here's a superficial barrier that you probably would have seen as something that you would want to pursue, but you just got in your own way. It's like,
Absolutely.
so, but
Mhm,
I wanted to put that out there because it's not about just how much money somebody makes, even though one of the things I find that women find attractive about very successful men, it's not about the money. And this is something that for men, I think is really, I think it's important for them to know as well. It's not about that. It's about the way that they show up in the world, the passion that they have, the drive, the territory that they've taken in the world because they've had to overcome things. That they become this embodied being as a result of creating something really massive. And so it's not about the money.
totally.
Yeah.
Well, in that, yeah, it takes the right partner to be able to support and appreciate all of that too.
Mhm.
So, okay,
Exactly.
awesome.
That was a little bit of a tangent, but
Yeah, no, I love it. So helpful. So talk a little bit about consistency over time. You talked about how people are looking for these sparks right away,
Mhm.
but you've talked about in one of your posts consistency over time.
Yeah. So that has to do with like you said, the fireworks. People expect this chemistry and they want to know immediately. And sometimes I see this with my clients too, where they're like, she's great, literally has everything I'm looking for, or he checks all of the boxes, but no, I'm not interested. And I'm like, okay, well, can we unpack that? Can we dig in a little deeper? And it really is about two people choosing to show up consistently over time. Are they showing up with integrity and good communication and respect and support and levity when needed or depth when needed? It's really all of these. It's a combination of little moments that get strung together that create trust and create connection. And you know sorry. Fox has some things to say as well. He also feels passionately about this. But yeah, so I do think it's it is really important that we don't just write people off. I think again, back to your question of what's one of the biggest issues in modern dating, and I think it's that we just are so ready to jump to the next thing because we think that there's an infinite stream of people, and that can be true because there are a lot of people and we can connect more easily, but creating connection with somebody takes time and
Mhm,
you have to put in the work on both sides. And I think people can be pretty short-sighted, men or women, um,
mhm,
and not realize it's going to take some effort, and we're both going to have to choose to keep showing up, because people would be like, I don't know if they're really right for me, and I'm like, this person is choosing to show up with all of your weird idiosyncrasies and like quirks, and you know, people take that for granted sometimes too, because no one's perfect. And so the ones who are accepting and keep showing up and wanting to put in the work, there's value in that.
mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense too, because in relationships, like sometimes you're gonna feel more loving towards a person, and you're gonna go through ups and downs, and you want that foundation, that friendship, and that
Mm.
deeper connection with someone versus just something that is going to be fleeting, and
Yeah.
that commitment to work through whatever does come up. Like that's
Yep.
what makes a relationship work, right? Ultimately.
Yeah, and people say they want it until they're in that situation.
Mm,
And then I really do find that it's people finding reasons to keep love away. So they'll make excuses, they'll say it's something else, but it's really that they aren't willing to go deep with somebody or really be seen.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you work through a lot of that like trauma or like attachment styles and all of that? I'm sure that comes up for your clients.
It definitely comes up. I will say it is very fascinating because when I was really focused as primarily a dating coach, people
Hmm.
would come to me and they'd be very open. And as a result, I would see them end up in very healthy relationships, getting engaged, getting married. And it was amazing to walk through them, walk through that process with them.
Yeah.
In matchmaking, it's a lot more lucrative, but because people are like, "Oh, you're going to give me the thing that I want and I don't have to work on myself." So, it is fascinating. So, I do work with my clients as much as they're open around these things, but honestly, sometimes people don't really want to work on that stuff. They don't want to look at the deeper things. One of the amazing things about matchmaking that I don't think people realize is, I start to see patterns emerge as the third party, and so I can give invaluable feedback to my clients by saying, "Hey, there's been a number of women, or hey, there's been a number of men who have expressed X, Y, or Z." And this is feedback that no one would ever tell you otherwise to your face. So this is like the real deal stuff that no, you're not going to get elsewhere. And some people who are personal development minded will say that is worth the price tag of matchmaking because you will get the real honest truth. And if you want to grow and you want to overcome your hurdles, this is an amazing way to do it. I don't really know of another way where you get the candid type of feedback that you're going to get through matchmaking. But yeah, it's a pretty fascinating process.
100%. And that's only going to contribute to a better relationship long term too.
Yeah, if people want it. So that's the thing is if like how ready are you to really look at those shadowy parts of yourselves or heal, or is it I just want to go on dates with handsome men and beautiful women and hope for the best, or am I actually gonna do the work to have a different outcome?
Yeah. Do you find it more challenging to work with clients who aren't willing to do that work, or it's just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's challenging because, I do this because I love it and I love bringing people together and I love love, you know? And so when I see people who are getting in their own way and they are so stubborn to making change, when I'm like the tools are right here for you, and I have literally guided people from the dark depths of things into healing process, journey to self-worth, and then finding the right person and getting married. It's like from being at square one to your dream result. I've walked people through that, and so I want that for them. And it's really, I get emotionally invested, and I have to learn to kind of take a step back and let people be where they are and trust that the things that I'm sharing and the process that I'm walking them through are exactly what they need at that point in time in their journey.
That's so beautiful. And it gives me chills to think about because, I mean, what bigger decision can we make than who to spend our lives with, right?
Mhm.
Pretty big decision and not one to be
Huge.
taken lightly. And
It's not, but it's, yeah, it takes a lot of courage, and I think that that's something that can be lacking in modern times too. Everything's very convenience oriented. So to really take bold leaps of faith, obviously if you have a relationship with God and you're trusting God and being obedient, then you continue to take those steps forward. And
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you see a relationship between people who are willing to do the work and a belief in God or spirituality or something?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Necessarily. But I do see people who are very serious. Like it becomes apparent to me pretty early on
Hmm.
how serious someone is about having a partnership versus someone that is just running old patterns and toxic loops and is in an unhealthy place, even probably lying to themselves.
Hmm.
So I can tell. And I would say, all of my clients have some connection to something greater, whether that's God in a more Christian sense, or whether that's they experience God through nature, and but there's some level of spirituality. And I think that that's probably because those are the people that I attract and I want to work with. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. And so you did this other reel, and I love what you said in it too. And it's a common thing these days. So there are a lot of women who are successful and independent, and oftentimes they say, well, I don't need a man, so it's not a priority. So I'm not going to invest in matchmaking or invest in my life in this way. I'm just going to continue living, and I'm fine if I don't meet someone. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I think again, this is one of the modern day distortions that we're facing where women have been bolstered to be everything. So unfortunately, because we've had to, a lot of women are like, okay, I've had to step up and provide for myself. I have to step up and provide for my family. Like, what else am I going to do? I'm not just going to sit back and not have these things. Um, so unfortunately, it's as a result of our culture, and it's like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it that men have gotten softer so women have had to get stronger, or is it that women have gotten out of balance so men have gotten softer? Is it programming from the social influences that we have, political influences, all that kind of stuff? So when I see women have this hard shell about them, and they really have convinced themselves on some level, probably a coping level or coping mechanism, that they don't need a man, it makes me really sad because, like I said before, men and women are created equally but differently, and so we're meant to add to each other's lives, and anyone who thinks they can just do everything alone is isolating themselves and keeping themselves from having the biggest gifts and blessings and intimacy in relationships. So I
Mhm.
really, and it's really unattractive to men when women are like that, like I said, on that polarity scale, especially the types of men that these women feel like they would want. They're like, I'm so strong. I need a man who's like so strong. He has to be the most alpha. He has to out alpha me. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry to tell you, but the men who are the most alpha masculine men are not even going to consider a woman like that most of the time, because they're like, no, I'm not dealing with that kind of nonsense. And so that's a tricky one that women get stuck in. It's like, I just need a really strong man who can be more alpha than I am. And it's like, or maybe you have to look at where you can soften as a woman as well if you really want that, which
Mhm.
doesn't mean it's right or wrong. I mean, like I said, I personally think a lot of it has to do with our programming, and that it's been intentional that women are getting more masculine, men are becoming more effeminate. And, I think that there's something to that, and it's very unfortunate. And I could go down a deep, dark rabbit hole around all of that. But
Yes.
um, I like, my heart hurts for women who just put up this hardness, and men too, where they're, this like, I don't need another person.
Mhm.
Well, if you're in a healthy place, it's not necessarily about need, but it could be you get a lot of value added to your life as a result of that. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. When you said too, it can help you feel even more secure and just when you're sharing your life with someone. So it brings a whole nother level of just happiness and different experiences
Yeah.
in life.
Exactly. And we're so, especially after the pandemic and this, like, so much isolation, and people have gotten really used to living more isolated.
Yeah.
And we're not meant to be that as human beings at all. That is not how we're supposed to be. And we're not meant to just slave away at a job and be alone and not go deeper. I mean, I really think we were created. I feel like the reason we were created is to love. And so I always ask people, where are you putting up walls that are keeping you from that?
Mm, so good. Yes. It's like that quote, the goal isn't to search for love, but to search for everything that's keeping you from it or something like
Exactly. The Rumi quote. Yeah.
that. Yes.
Mhm.
So, do you have any specific tips to help women who are in that position just to soften a little bit or let down their guard?
I would say, first of all, instead of pointing outwardly, which is a very masculine kind of a thing, it's like that projection. Like, I need a man to be different. I need somebody else to be different. I need the world to be different. It's like, okay. Or you could take a more feminine approach and like soften and go inward
Okay.
and say, let me look at myself and let me look at where I could be showing up differently as well. Because, a lot of like, people say it's a numbers game with dating, and I'm like, maybe to an extent, but not really. It's about quality over quantity always. And so if you're for years and years running through the same, going through a bunch of dates on dating apps and doing all this stuff, and I can speak from that place because I've done it myself too, but maybe you're going to have to stop and look at yourself. And so for women, really just declaring what they actually want. So sitting with it. Okay, why do I feel like it's even possible for me to have a man that shows up and supports me and loves me?
Mhm.
Why wouldn't that feel good to me? Let me think about that. Do I feel like I'm deserving of that? Do I feel worthy of that? Where are the areas that I'm pushing that away? How could I soften? How could I be more vulnerable in my communication? How could I become more of a safe place, you know, for men? And but that said, of course, not let yourself be walked all over by somebody who isn't well meaning. It's good to have discernment always, but yeah, I would say take a more feminine approach. I forget who it was, but I was listening to something and they were like, our anatomy is literally like the man's anatomy is like we're going out in the world, and a
Yeah.
woman's, is internal. And so instead of having this like me against the world kind of attitude, to really, to soften and to lean back and be introspective.
Mhm. Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, I thought, I was like, that does make a lot of sense when I heard that the first time too. I was like, we are wired that way.
Yeah, and our bodies are created differently, but created to come together. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
yes, okay. And then what about from the opposite side of the spectrum? If someone is like been single for a while, but they are feeling, oh, I'm not sure if I am worthy, or I'm not ready to date, or my life isn't perfect in these
Yeah.
different areas. Maybe I shouldn't date. What would your advice be to someone in that situation?
So there's never going to be a perfect person. And there may or may not be a perfect time. It's a more complex answer because, again, if someone has a relationship with God, then they can pray about it, they can talk to God about it, they can really, even if they're meditative or they're introspective, they can look at themselves and say, is it healthy for me? What do I really need? And you can test it out too. It's like we don't have to be fixed in our approach. Especially as women, that's the beautiful thing, is we're very fluid with our emotions. So one day we may feel one way, another day we may feel another way. And so I do think it's good to be true to yourself and honor yourself in that way. But if you have a relationship with God, I think it's good to check in with God. And then we do our best. There's no, I mean, people are worthy of love. That doesn't mean that there isn't personal growth to be had individually or, together. I think the most growth is going to come from being in a relationship. So, um, and yeah, you can get through hard things with a partner, and everyone's going to have a bit of a different story and journey and testimony. So I think it is important that people check in with themselves and maybe not compare too much to what everyone else is doing, but to really check in with themselves and check in with God.
Okay. I love that. So there's no perfect way to do it, or I think people get so rigid with what they want in a
Mhm.
partner, or how it should look, or how they should meet, or all of that. So just to be more open.
Yeah, that's definitely the word. I think people can be very rigid. And as a woman with rigidity, I mean, it's pretty unattractive. I'll be honest, men find that very unattractive.
Yeah.
So
Okay. All right. So one more question.
Mhm.
So you working with men very closely for a while. What tips would you give to women besides what we've already, if we haven't covered anything? Like if women knew
Yeah.
these few things, like it would be a game changer for
Okay. I'm like, where do I start?
them.
One of the biggest pressing things that is coming to my mind right now is around sex. And
Mhm.
so I think that women, and I see this a lot of times, especially with kind of younger women or maybe women who just haven't really declared from themselves, like, I really want a husband. I want a life partner. I want the father of my future children or for my current children. And so to look at a man through that lens and see how he treats you through that lens versus, well, we'll just see what happens. And like, it's sexy and it's fun. And like, I guess, we could kind of hook up or maybe we'll have sex and see what happens. And to me, I think that, you know, I see women all the time that get really excited about a man, and so they'll sleep with them. And a man will sleep with a woman if he's attracted to her, and it does not mean that he has longer term interest.
Mm,
And it also doesn't mean that he's necessarily a bad guy either, because if a woman is like into it as well, he's like, okay, she's into it too. But it
yeah.
does mean different things. I think men can have sex a lot more casually. Not all men, of course, but I do see this with some of my clients. Usually it's not the Christian ones. Usually the Christian ones are on a totally different page, which is a really nice thing about dating Christian men is you're like, okay, we're not going to jump into sex, and that's such a relief and that's very healing because I don't think that's how it's meant to be. Like, oh, let's just hook up and see what happens. I
Right.
see that not that it can't work out, but I see it not working out more often than it working out. And usually a woman feels used, she feels upset. It takes a lot longer for her to heal from it. So it's like she'll get so excited about somebody and then they'll sleep together and it doesn't go well and it takes a while to bounce back because on some level she knows that she shared like a very sacred part of herself with somebody who wasn't deserving. And what does that mean about the way she feels about herself? It's a very nuanced and complex subject, but I think that the main point for women is that a man can have sex without being interested in someone, and just because he's attracted to you and things seem to be going well, you know I think it's so important to just know your boundaries and not and just own them. Be confident, be grounded in them, and it's okay. You're not like, excuse my language, but being a bitch if you are expressing your boundaries.
Yeah.
So, I think that's really important.
Hmm.
And a
Well,
man will respect that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. And it's biology for women too, right? That they're going to, the hormones, they're going to get more attached. So it's not like it's just a matter of being firm in your mindset, like, oh, this is just going to be casual. Like something changes within women to make us more emotionally attached to someone,
Yeah.
regardless of how strong we think we are, right?
I think they say it's like 6 seconds of hugging someone before a woman will start to feel attachment.
Oh, wow.
So just a hug. That's like the chemicals being released in the brain from a hug. That's 6 seconds or longer, 30 seconds or longer. And it's like we're really starting to create some ties with somebody, a bond to somebody.
Yeah.
And so imagine beyond that, having sex with somebody, and yeah, we're definitely wired. We're wired to bond to someone. And I think that's a really good point. It's important for women to know that, yeah, you might be like, yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It's not that big a deal. But on a physiological, biological level, that's actually not true.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Well, and that comes back to being honest with ourselves and looking at patterns and what's not working and all the things.
exactly.
All
Yeah.
right.
It's a fun ride.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, I'm so enjoyed this conversation with you, Rachel. I really appreciate you. I feel like I could ask you 100 more questions, but
Next time.
yes, definitely.
Okay.
So, is there anything that you want to offer anyone who's watching this, or where do they find you and get to know you more?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram at London, Londyn, music, music. I was a former #1 charting artist, so
Amazing.
it's still in my bio. Like, but anyway, so yeah, and then cinque.com/Rachel RACHL. If you want to join our free database as a woman or a man, I do have female clients as well. Or if you'd like to inquire about becoming a client or any dating coaching, that kind of stuff, that's the best way to get in touch. Or you can email me at Rachel@cinque, again, cinque.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.